Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight, I've got a quick hit video on a fragrance I've been periodically testing. It's a sample that was actually sent to me by the gentleman that I purchased this vintage bottle of Scandal from. He sent me a couple samples and decants because I purchased the bottle off of him. And then what ended up happening is he never sent it. And so eBay just refunded me the money, and I was like, what the heck, man? You know, like, I bought this bottle, you just ghosted me. And he got back in touch with me and said, hey, I had a lot of stuff going on in my life. I apologize. I would be willing to swap you for it. And I said, man, I don't know if I trust you after you just ghosting me. He's like, let me send you some samples, try to prove some goodwill to you. And he did. He sent me a bunch of stuff. It was very kind of him. And then we ended up switching. We swapped for a Ventus. I swapped him a 75 ml Ventus that was like half full for this, partial of vintage Scandal, which I've shown on my channel before. But one of the samples he sent me, this was years ago. I think this was like two and a half years ago, maybe. Is he sent me this, and this is Roja's 51 Pour Homme. Now, this was the Eau de Parfum. It doesn't say it on there, but he told me it was the Eau de Parfum, which came out in 2015. And then what Roja did is what he always does. He did the exact same thing with this fragrance right here, Oligarch. He released it in Eau de Parfum first, which has the cap that looks like this, the gold cap, not the shiny Swarovski crystal cap. And then what he ended up doing is the same Roja trick where he discontinues the Eau de Parfum and then releases a Parfum version that's twice as expensive. And so that's the only one you can then buy. But in the case of 51 Pour Homme, whereas Oligarch Parfum is still available, 51 Pour Homme Parfum is discontinued as well. So the Eau de Parfum and the Parfum is discontinued. And these late night quick hit videos are just kind of supposed to be just a quick initial thoughts on a fragrance that, I'm never going to buy a bottle of. I'm never going to, wear full time periodically because normally because I just don't have enough juice. But in this case, he gave me, this was probably 80% full when I got it. So you can see I've worn it to bed a couple times. I'm wearing it to bed tonight. I sprayed myself about 4 hours ago here, and I've got a fresh spray right here. You can almost see the gleam of the fresh spray. Okay, so let's talk about 51 Eau de Parfum. It's a fragrance that no one talks about anymore. It's kind of one of those that just went to the wayside. And I will tell you why it went to the wayside. But first, I will tell you this. It is a good scent. So it's not that it's a bad scent. It's a good scent, but it was swimming in a world, in an ocean of fragrances that were competing in this space. And the space that it was basically competing for is head space, brain space, nose space within Frederick Mall's Portrait of a Lady. Okay? And so Eugene, who will come up again later in the video, from the fragrance channel You Smells Good, and from the fragrance brand, Les Abstraits now, since he has his own brand. And this fragrance from his brand is going to make an appearance in this video because it is pertinent. But interestingly enough, Eugene did a fragrance video 2 or 3 years ago, and he asked the question, is Roja Dove a clone brand? Okay? And the reason he asked that question is many of his fragrances harken back to other fragrances. Scandal will remind you a little bit of Pour Monsieur or YSL Pour Homme. What's the one right here? Great Britain will remind you of Chanel's Cuir de Russie. Another vintage, or Tabac Blanc from Caron, another vintage, hard to find, long lost fragrance. Diaghilev will remind you of Mitsuko mixed with Rochas Femme. And so and even some of the ones that are not all-time old classics like Oligarch will remind you of Terre de Hermes. And so the reason that this question of is Roja Dove a clone brand keeps coming up is because his fragrances keep reminding you of fragrances from the past. Danger, Pour Homme will remind you very heavily of Guerlain's Heritage. So that's the reason why Eugene was asking the question. It's a very fair question. Now, to Roja's defense, excuse me, some of the stuff that he has done, I absolutely love. Like Danger, for example, Oligarch, Diaghilev. I mean, they are just loves for me. I love wearing these fragrances. But as a fragrance enthusiast, as a fragrance connoisseur, I know that they're based, if not copies, they're heavily inspired by fragrances of the past, okay? And, you know, you could have this argument till you're blue in the face with people. Whether Roja's a clone brand and whether it's worth it, because when you're paying for, you know, when you're paying this kind of money, top dollar, 50 mil is $500. That's top dollar in the fragrance game. Exorbitant amount of money. When you're paying that kind of money, not only are you expecting to smell something that is of the highest quality ingredients, you're also expecting to smell something that is unique and that is original and that the perfumer spent the time to create, right? And you get one half of that with Roja's fragrances. The other half of it, you don't. You don't get the originality per se, because they do harken back so much to fragrances of the past, which for someone like me that's a vintage fragrance lover, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But, you know, value, you have to understand what you're getting into before you buy a Roja. You really have to understand, because if you're not a big-time, hardcore fragrance connoisseur to the point where you can say, okay, I want to buy Danger Pour Homme because even though I know it's 90% Heritage, that extra 10% gives me personal enjoyment. I appreciate the extra animalics. I appreciate the extra ambergris. I appreciate the extra cumin. I want to see what Roja changed to make it his own. That's another level of experiencing perfume, right? And so the reason I'm saying all this is 51 Pour Homme falls into that same trap. It is Frederic Mall's Portrait of a Lady with Roja's bases. And so when I say Roja's bases, let me read you the notes and explain what I mean by Roja's base. So it opens up with this lemon, bergamot, and lavender. The lavender is very smooth and typical herbal, masculine, beautiful lavender, okay? And there's geranium, there's rose, big amount of rose in this. Rose is the #1 flower, hands down. Although geranium plays off of rose. They combo with each other because geranium sometimes has this spicy rose-like smell. Some perfumers will even substitute geranium for rose. So geranium and rose are the two biggest notes. There's also jasmine, ylang ylang, and violet. Roja loves violet. And then you get galbanum, pink pepper, caraway, cinnamon, nutmeg, saffron, patchouli, oak moss, cedar wood, cashmere wood, which is cashmeran. We did a video on synthetics recently if you've been following my channel. Sandalwood, oud, benzoin, vanilla, apopanax, birch, labdanum, leather, ambrette, and musk. So there's always a ton of notes with Roja's fragrances. But basically what that base kind of, the reason I said, you know, fragrances that are hearkening to other fragrances but with Roja's bases is that if you actually look at some of the previous fragrances Roja has put out, especially from the Middle Eastern line, or fragrances of that style, like for example, if you look at something like Majestic Oud, Majestic Oud has many of the same base notes. You're going to find saffron, cedarwood, patchouli, oud, labdanum, ambrette. You know, so these notes go over and over and over again. Bergamot in the top, jasmine from grass. And what it feels like when you smell many of his fragrances, especially the ones where they don't get a lot of hype, the ones that I absolutely love have very distinct DNAs, but some of the others where I just have these little atomizers, I'm never going to own a full bottle. You know, Majestic Oud falls into that category. In fact, I did an entire video on Majestic Oud. You can go check it out. But it feels like he kind of created a fragrance thinking that most people aren't going to know what oud smells like. You know what I mean? They don't know what real oud smells like. And I think he's right for 95% of people. That extra 5% is that's us. That's the big time fragrance connoisseurs who smell the Bortnikoffs, smell the Arisadores, and we know, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? And, this type of DNA will not sell nowadays, especially for $2,000. Not when you can get real oud. Arisadore is putting out real. You can buy the real thing for a fourth of the price, if not less than that. And so that's part of the problem that he had. And the bases continue to kind of feel the same. So if you've smelled things like the exclusive Parfum by Roja, you'll pick up, again, a very similar base. And so, like, for example, the exclusive Parfum from 2016 has cedarwood, saffron, cashmere wood, sandalwood, oud, vanilla, birch, labdanum, leather. Sound familiar? I mean, it's almost exactly the same base with the addition of ambergris and amyris and cypriol and elemi. There's no elemi in 51 Pour Homme. There is caraway and a little bit of cinnamon as well, which gives it this kind of a warmer take on it. But other than that, it's almost identical. There's no ambrette here, there's ambrette here. There's no a Papanex there, there's a Papanex there. So there's a couple notes kind of changed around. And then that oud birch thing that he has going on. And the reason I say all that is that when I smell 51 Pour Homme, it reminds me very heavily of Rojas of the past that I've smelled. It has that Roja DNA. If you've smelled Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, if you've smelled Sultanate of Oman, you're going to get that Middle Eastern DNA base, and it has that. With almost like this Portrait of a Lady vibe stapled on top, okay? And so there's no clove, and so that's one of the big differentiators is Portrait of a Lady has a huge clove note to me, gigantic, enormous clove note. But it really does smell like Roja's take on Portrait of a Lady. Now, let me tell you what I get when I first sprayed 51 Pour Homme, and I've never smelled it, okay? So I've never smelled it before. The very first time that I sprayed it, and I did not look at the note listing, the very first thing that hit me was cypriol. I went, this is cypriol. And I fully expected to see cypriol in the note listing because so many of his other fragrances, like, the exclusive Parfum, Majestic Oud, let's check and see if Sultanate of Oman has cypriol. Sultanate of Oman from 2016. It has, this one does not have cypriol. It has papyrus instead to help increase that, that frankincense vibe. And elemi also helps increase that frankincense vibe. So he kind of just tweaks a little bit here and there. And, but when I first sprayed 51 Pour Homme, I went, this is cypriol, and this is that classic Roja base that they created. And it is a very pleasant base. It's very posh. But you know what? Now that I've got so many Rojas and I've smelled so many, this DNA is kind of getting a little bit boring to me. You know what I mean? Like, I spray it, I smell it, and I just feel like, I almost feel like they're taking the lazy way out. You know what I mean? Like, they have this blend of materials that smells very good in the base. It smells posh. It smells elegant. It smells like a Roja. You know what I mean? And they just kind of change a couple ingredients here and there. With Sultanate of Oman, they increase the papyrus, they increase the elemi, they increase the frankincense. With the exclusive Parfum, they increase the raspberry, saffron, cypriol, and they add a little bit of ambergris and amyris, and they keep kind of the same kind of base. With 51 Pour Homme, it's the rose, that gets kind of amped up. And they've added a couple things like ambrette, which is a musk alternative, if you will. And it can kind of smell like you're smelling like a boozy cask-like barrel And they've added a little bit of a Papanax, which is a note that doesn't always pop up in the bases. And a Papanax is basically like the sweet myrrh, which I really like the smell of sweet myrrh. But when you smell fragrances that have a good dose of a Papanax in them, like, for example, when you smell something like YSL's Opium from the old days, the EDT, or the Secret de Parfum, or if you smell something like, there is a Les Indemodables called Oriental Velours. It has a beautiful myrrh note, sweet myrrh note. When you smell those and it's really amped up and it's really overdosed, you realize what a beautiful note it is, and you realize just what a tiny amount Roja puts in here. And so this is kind of the trap for me, right? Because does this smell posh? Yes. If you had all the money in the world, would you buy it even though it's discontinued and you'd have to pay quadruple the price? If you have all the money in the world, sure. But most of us are on we're on a budget. We have a certain amount of money we can allocate towards fragrances, and we have to kind of be smart with where we spend your money. Instead of buying a discontinued Roja for triple the price because it's impossible to find now and the person selling it knows that and they want to get their money's worth, go buy this. Let's circle back. Let's bring this video full circle. Let's bring it back to Eugene. Eugene's fragrance, La Daulaire Exquise from the brand Les Abstraits, has that beautiful rose note. By the way, I should mention something. This is a 4-hour dry down. As it begins to dry, you get a little bit of animalics, okay? Roja does animalics usually very tastefully, okay? He will add a little bit of animalics, but very rarely is it really overdosed. Diaghilev is probably one of the more overdosed animalic fragrances that I've smelled from him. Most of his stuff is very posh, very wearable. The animalics are sometimes, even if you can detect them, they're very well blended. Nothing really, you're never going to smell something like Antaeus or Koros or, you know, something like that from the brand of Roja. You just won't, because he wants his fragrances to be wearable anytime. He wants someone to walk into a Goodman's, Bergdorf, and, you know, drop $800 on his fragrances and bam, it's wearable. Excuse me, all year round. And so sometimes the fragrance connoisseurs like me, though, we want more animalics. Like I've said, one of the things that Russian Adam and I agree on, which if you haven't watched my interview with Russian Adam, go do it. Go watch all 3 of them. One guy said it's better than a Netflix series. I'm telling you, Russian Adam is absolutely amazing. But he said something that really I agree with in my fragrance-loving soul, and that's that we always want more. We want more oud. We want more ambergris. We want more musk, more animalics, right? More civet. We want it to be intense and heavy and strong and all that stuff. And your desire for more when you're a frag head, you know, gets amped up and you want to discover and you want to smell things. And usually the best way to discover in the fragrance world is to go back in time, is to go smell the Koros, the Antaeus, the Leonard Porhomes, the Van Cleef & Arpels, Porhomme and Sar, and all that stuff everyone, you know, hypes to high heaven. And very rarely do you get a modern fragrance that can compete with something like a Frederic Malle with the rose note, can compete with a Roja with the poshness, okay? Because this fragrance is also very posh, this Les Abstraits. I think this is a very posh fragrance. And also satisfy the internal desire of someone like me for more. Because the dry down has this animalic castoreum like I have rarely smelled. I've smelled it a couple times. I smelled it in Imitation Man from Amouage. I smelled it in Antaeus. You know, those kind of fragrances have that castoreum that you can tell. I mean, it's high quality castoreum. And La Daulaire Exquise has that. And so you get 100 mils. It's $250 or whatever it is. Whereas the Roja, you're going to pay, God knows what you're going to pay now. I think they were 50 mil bottles back then. Just like the, you know, ones that I showed earlier, these stubby or 50 mil bottles. And who knows what you're going to pay on the secondary market for a discontinued Roja like this. Probably going to be through the roof. And so I would recommend buy this. If this DNA interests you, either go for Portrait of a Lady, which now that I know about this, I can't recommend Portrait of a Lady. I will not be buying a full bottle of this. I will review it. I'll do a review before my juice is gone. But, you know, as good as this is, and there are some differences here and there with Portrait of a Lady, you know, Portrait of a Lady has the clove that's amped up. It has, it does not have the big time castoreum animalic dry down. It doesn't have the orris that Les Substrates La Dowleric Squeeze has. It has a big time fruity raspberry like blackcurrant thing going on. And if you notice, the patchouli and cinnamon are in Portrait of a Lady. And in 51 Pour Homme, you get a lot of cinnamon and you get a lot of patchouli. And I actually do like that. I like the cinnamon feel of 51 Pour Homme. The problem is when you get someone like me that sniffs so much, this would not impress. You know, it's nice, yes. Would I wear it? Absolutely. Would I spend $1,000 for 25 or 50 mil or whatever the bottle size is? Hell no, absolutely not. This is one of those, I'm glad to smell it. Yes, it has a little bit of a leathery dry down. No, Portrait of a Lady doesn't have that leathery dry down. Yes, it has that Roja poshness to it, has that Roja DNA. Does Portrait of a Lady have that Roja DNA? No, but it's a Frederick Malle. I mean, Frederick Malle is using the top quality ingredients. And so, you know, for me, it's, is Roja a clone house? I don't know, but it just seems like every time I try another one, it's compared to something else from the past. And, you know, I'll keep putting my thoughts out here. I'll keep doing these videos, but 51 Pour Homme for me, based on everything I know, and especially based on the fact that Eugene's fragrance is now available, value for money on this, for me, is very low. It's one of those, it satisfies an urge for me because I know what it smells like. I can store it in the mental database, but I would never go spend my hard-earned dollars on this. Absolutely not. And, you know, that's why I want to put my thoughts out there, because I think value for money on this is very low, and especially since this DNA is saturated now. Portrait of a Lady was a huge hit. I mean, I think Diptyque copied them. You know, there were other copies, I think, that tried to come through. Maitre Premier did Radical Rose and all this stuff. And, you know, it's, there's a ton of copies that came through from Portrait of a Lady. Tiziano Terenzi did, Parpora. And so, but for me, the one that satisfies the itch is this. This has that castoreum in the dry down that I just absolutely love. Go watch I did a full review of this. You can go watch it, or an initial impression, but I think I was very fair with what I said, and I stand by what I said on Les Substrates, and I'm not just saying it, or La Dowleric Squeeze. And I'm not just saying it because Eugene is my friend either. That's truly how I feel. I bought this bottle with my hard-earned money. He did not send this to me for free. He did send me a decant and a t-shirt, but he did not send me this bottle for free. This I paid for. And one of the best, you know, signs of a reviewer or a fragrance connoisseur who gets up here and just bloviates all day is that if they're spending their hard-earned money on a bottle, then you know they really like it. Especially when it's $260 or whatever it was with, you know, with shipping. So that's my take on Roja's 51 Pour Homme. If you have experience with it, you know, do let me know. The only thing that I wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to say yet is that the rose in here is not really fresh, and it's not really animalic musky. It's kind of a middle of the road rose. I think they tried to make it a little bit more masculine by adding things like lavender and, you know, if you look at 51 for women, there were other flowers added like tuberose and, you know, lily of the valley that's not in 51 Pour Homme. So they kind of stripped some of that back. And I think they just kind of stapled it onto that Middle Eastern base. And they added a couple things that gave you Portrait of a Lady vibe, like cinnamon and patchouli and stuff like that. And there you have it. So what do you guys think? Is Roja a clone house? I mean, you can tell I love the house. I have a lot of bottles from them. Some of I mean, Diaghilev made my top 10 of all time, So there are some things I obviously love, but the more you smell from the house, the more you realize that there were also a lot of misses maybe, or, you know, Roja fanboys think everything that he does is the greatest thing of all time, and I try to be objective. You know, there are some things I think are the greatest, but there's also some things that I think are, you know, it kind of is what it is. So there you go, 51, Pour Homme, Eau de Parfum. The note listing on the X-Ray, by the way, is exactly the same. So if anyone anyone smelled 51 Pour Homme Parfum from 2017, from 2 years later, I would love to know if you guys have ever done a comparison and think they're the same. I've never sniffed the Parfum, but you know, if anyone, if I ever got my nose on some, I would let you guys know. But the note listing is identical. So I doubt there's very much difference between the Eau de Parfum and the Parfum. But that's my take on a fragrance that probably not many people even know about, never mind care about. But I do like to put my thoughts out there, kind of like a little mini library that we're creating, you know, little mini library of my thoughts. I'm putting it under the Roja playlist, so you can go check this out. You can go watch all my Roja videos, and pretty soon I'm going to rank. I'm going to do a family portrait ranked on the House of Roja, and I'll give you my least favorite to my favorite Roja. So thanks for watching, everybody. Do let me know if you have experience with this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thanks for the support. Cheers, and everyone have a good night. Goodbye.